boss?
My boss is Mitchell Leverett. He's the division chief in the Washington office for solid minerals.
Okay, thanks.
And if you'd like his phone number, you guys can call him direct if you'd like.
That would be great.
Yeah.
All right. His number is 202-912-7113. And he's actually in Spokane all week, but we'll be back on Monday.
All right, thank you.
And Sherry, would it be okay if we took some contact information from you as well?
Mm-hmm. My telephone number is 303-239-3758. And do you need my address as well? Or?
No, I think telephone number is fine, but could we get your last name?
Thompson.
Is it with a P?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Sherry with an I or with a Y?
Sherri.
Okay, great.
And Sherry, what's your email?
STHOMPSO@BLM.gov.
So Thompson with no N?
Because there's a Steve Thompson.
Oh.
If you put an N in, Steve will get the email, and he's usually really good about forwarding those to me, but he probably gets annoyed.
So you said that if we got you an email, you could potentially forward some information to us. I'm trying to remember what you were saying you forwarded.
The 1610 protest regulations?
That's right, yeah. That's right.
Okay, so I got a pen right here.
I'm happy to give you my email. This is Rachel. My email is F as in Frank, ERN, the number 4, your face, YOURFACE. There's a long story. It's
Okay.
at Gmail.
At Gmail?
.com.
Okay.
So again, Fern, the number 4, your face, at gmail.com.
Okay, and then send the protest regs. I can do that.
Sherry, I'll scan this. I got everyone's names here. I'll scan and send a copy to you today.
Okay, yeah, that would be good. And I feel like you guys are somewhat frustrated by the process, and I am sorry about it just seems like it's kind of late. The regulations, the 1610 regulations kind of also set out what the process is for planning documents for BLM, and that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because, I mean, when you consider a November 9th release of this, and, you know, we're at December 6th today, I mean, we're less than a month, and that it's too late for us to have even begun to try to digest what is there, and that it's really honestly too late within the process for us to do that is a really sorry statement.
Well, we did start in 2011. I mean, so it has been it's been an ongoing process.
Yeah. It's just difficult because, we're the public, we're not doing this as our jobs, we're
Right.
all trying to understand this information within the context of the rest of our lives, and we have 4 or 5 large tomes to go through, and it's just a lot of information. And I understand that this is how policy and government works, but it's very difficult to access, especially when the one opportunity that the Salt Lake residents have had to contact and meet and deal with our representatives here in the city was a really a sham. I know it wasn't what you were intending to do.
Opportunities because there was the scoping process as well.
Right. Okay.
And that was a meeting that was, people were allowed to vocalize, give oral comments at.
That's true.
Was that at the public library here in Salt Lake?
No, it was
Little America.
Little America. Okay. Yeah, I knew it was at one of the Americas. I'm not sure which one we had.
You had one in the afternoon, one in the evening that day, didn't you, Sherry?
Yep. We had one at 1 and one at 7.
And what was the date of that?
Oh, it's on my website. Hang on. I can tell you when yours was. Just a second. Would have been at the end of April in 2011, but let me get the specific date for you for Salt Lake.
And so you were saying, sorry, I know you're looking something up, but I'm running out of time. So this document doesn't allow for commercial leases. there would have to be further analysis to actually, once a lease has been proposed or requested by a
Nominated.
corporation.
Absolutely.
There would have to
And
be
so really, that's, I mean, we had a lot of cooperating agencies the first time around, and they kind of dropped out and said, you know, we don't need to be involved. This is just an allocation decision, and even that decision can be revisited. The time we want to be involved is at the leasing stage.
And what agencies are you referring to?
The Bureau of Reclamation and the Forest Service.
Right, okay.
Let me just, okay, so,
So Sherry, I looked for what a definition of R&D is versus commercial. I was unable to find that in the PEIS.
well, R&D was kind of something that Congress set out, the RD&D leases in that Section 369 of the Energy Policy Act. And if you look at Section 369, Part C, a leasing program for research and development of oil shale. In accordance with Section 21 of the Mineral Leasing Act and any other applicable laws, except as provided in this section, not later than 180 days after the date of enactment of this Act, from land otherwise available for leasing, the Secretary of Interior shall make available for leasing such land as the Secretary considers to be necessary to conduct research and development activities with respect to technologies for the recovery of liquid fluids from oil shale and tar sands on public lands. And so that's kind of the
So there's
overall
no
direction that we
size
got, but then,
definition
well,
at all?
well, on the specific definition, I mean, we had a Federal Register notice that specifically set out what we would do with the program, and then if you look at the actual lease documents, which are up on our website, on the White River Field Office website and the Vernal website, you would be able to see specifically what rights that lease grants someone. So one of the differences is that when conducting research and development, the government, unlike in the 70s and 80s, isn't subsidizing the research for these companies. So what they decided to provide as an incentive this time is, you know, essentially land. And while they're doing research and development, their operations are royalty-free, which kind of makes sense because for many of them, you know, they're not producing any product right now. Once you go to a commercial lease, you would need, you know, to start paying rents and royalties on your land. You know, so that's a big difference right there.
So once they start producing any liquid, they're commercial?
No.
Okay,
No,
so
no.
at what quantity of oil or recovery of bitumen would it become commercial?
They have to prove that their process can make a profit commercially. So,
Make a profit. So it's, they can put in a lot more than they're making in revenue and still be R&D.
No, I mean, they have to do quarterly reports, so let me just, I'll just kind of give an example of a company here in Colorado doing some work. So they're actually going to install their heaters this month and start actually turning them on next month. And they figure they're going to need to heat between 4 and 6 months. Now, they might be wrong, you know, but they might be right. You know, maybe they'll start seeing production after the second month, maybe after the third month, maybe. I mean, that's part of what the RD&D is. But, you know, they have told us that, you know, they're going to produce a certain quantity of production, and at that point, they're going to be making, you know, they're going to have to analyze the data from the previous 6 months, and then they're going to make a go, no-go decision on whether or not they can do this at a commercial scale. And so, you know, we're not going to just let someone produce, you know, 200,000 barrels of oil off of an RD&D lease and not come knocking at their door going, guys, hey, you know, looks like you got a pretty good thing going here. You know, we'd like to see an application for conversion to commercial. So, I mean, we're not just, you know, letting them out there willy-nilly. You know, we keep a really good eye on them. We get quarterly reports.
And so the point is the government is incentivizing this development because they are intending to make profit off of renting this land to these companies.
Well, you know, the BLM, we're a multiple use agency, and so we're not just protection of resources, but we're also about development of the public's resources. And so, you know, this is the part of our agency that does the development. And, you know, if you look at the Energy Policy Act, that's essentially what we were directed to do.
So what funds put the 6-lane road in there?
I'm sorry?
What funds were used? Was it county road? Is it a county road that's in there
What
now?
funds is that? What road's that?
The 6-lane road
Along
into
Seabridge,
TarSands, Seabridge,
into PR Springs.
PR Springs area.
You know, I'm not familiar with you.
I know which one that is.
Okay.
Some of that fund comes from the Energy Impact Fund that the state gets. The county gets money from energy, and the state divvies it out. And that's a state project, and that's where the counties get the money. Is that it's an impact fund, Sherry, where they get energy money back from the state, the counties.
Oh, okay. So is it that part of the PILT payments?
Yes, I guess they get a
Okay.
bill payment.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're over our hour. Thank you so much, Sherry. We really appreciate you taking some.
Well, and you know, certainly feel free to give me a call if you know, you didn't feel like you got everything answered. You've got my number.
Yeah, we do, for sure.
Okay, I don't want you to think we're, you know, minimizing your concerns or anything. It's just where we're at in the document is we're pretty far along, and then also it is just an allocation document, and so a lot of the things that I think you're more specifically concerned about, we don't have the information to do it now. We'll be able to do it in the future. I mean, we have to do it in the future. We wouldn't be able to lease.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay. Sure. All right, I will follow up and send those protest regulations to you, Rachel. And
That'd be great.
Again, if you guys have any questions, please give me a call.
How many actual protests do you have then to consider?
Well, the protest period closes on Monday, and so I can't tell you how many I will have because generally, you know, everything will come flying in the door on Monday or a few days afterwards because it just has to be postmarked by Monday. Right now I have one from Garfield County,
And so
Colorado.
just to make sure, since, I mean, I'm somewhat surprised that our document didn't constitute protest, will what you send also describe what constitutes protest in addition to the process?
Will
What you send to me by email describe what constitutes protest in addition
Yes,
to the process? Okay, thank you.
Sherry, where are you located, just for the record? You're in
I
Denver?
work at the Colorado State office here in Denver. I work for the Washington office, but I live in Colorado and just essentially do this project from Colorado.
That's nicer.
Yeah, no, it was nice. I told them that would be the only way that I did it. So I think they agreed to it, and it's worked out because I'm close, you know, because I'm closer to the Piceance Basin, the Uinta Basin, and, you know, the Green River up in Wyoming than I would be if I were in Washington, D.C.
Okay. So any underground injection well, say on the PR Springs or any of those TarSands areas, would go through the state and it wouldn't be part of a NEPA process, or?
Well, if there's any, so underground injection wells are regulated by EPA. And so the Class 5, for example, on the AMSA project that I was talking about in Colorado, they have a Class 5 well, and so EPA approves Class 5 wells. I think the state approves the Class 1, Roger, and 3. I know it's 1. I don't know if they also approve Class 3 wells, but so depending on what type of a well it is, like if it's a water disposal well for oil and gas, the state regulates that. But for the Class 5 wells, EPA themselves, Region 8 in these 3 states would be the folks that the companies are having to get a permit from. And I know on the AMSO case that they do have a permit from EPA. It took quite a while to get it.
So what class would it be if they're re-injecting the processed water?
You know, I don't know that off the top
I'm
of
not
my
sure
head. I'm
either
sorry.
on top of my head. I'd have to look.
Okay, Roger said he'd look and see.
We can look.
Okay, all right, yeah, I'm sorry.
Or just get on the state dogging website would have it too, all the classifications. Because we're not involved in that project.
No, because it's on BLM land, we tend to work together, but they actually grant the permits, and then, their requirements would also be posted on the EPA website.
Yeah. Well, the whole process seems pretty frustrating to me because, for one thing, I got involved so late in the process, but for another, because so much of it is speculative, very qualitative, very, technologies aren't developed, they're not proven, they're not, all kinds of things. And so, the final has been done basically almost on a industry that isn't, that we don't even know what the impacts will be, and so it's hard to quantitate. How do you make comments when the technology isn't out there yet? And how is a whole EIS even developed without that? Is that generally what happens?
No, it generally is not what happens. It was kind of one of those situations where Congress said, do an EIS, and we went, okay. And so, we've done an EIS with the information that we have. But generally, when we do an EIS, we have a lot more information, which is why, in following the NEPA process, we had to commit, okay, well, yeah, we're going to be doing this again, and then again at the site-specific stage. So, from kind of coming in late and not feeling you're able to comment, your comments are going to be more valuable and more important and mean more because we're actually going to be able to have more information for you to comment on at the leasing stage. I'm not trying to discount comments on this, because of comments, we have made some changes between the draft and final. But, the leasing and the site-specific development stage, if you're concerned about the impacts, we'll have more information at those stages.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, sure, great.
Sherry.
Well,
Have fun with
feel free to
Gmail.
give me a call. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Information to know what the commercial impacts would be.
And that's true, yes.
And in fact, the R&D, so, how far does R&D go and where does commercial start? The impacts aren't really known yet. And,
right.
and the PIS is actually already final except for possible protest. We asked what the protest sections of the EIS, the People's EIS, what sections that was. Could you send?
Well, I did get the People's EIS, and I sent it on to the Washington office, and the planning shop is actually the shop that makes the determination as to whether that would be considered a protest or a comment. And Brenda called me on Monday, I think, and let me know that that it did not meet the standards for a protest, but that it would be considered as a comment in finalizing the record of decision.
So none of that document was considered protest? None of it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do you know what the standards are for being considered protest?
Yes, I do. We have a regulation.
So wasn't it that it needed to be submitted at a specific comment?
Well, comments are submitted on the draft, and after that, really you only can protest the document. And let me, looking for it right now, it's 1610 43 CFR 1610.
That's in the PIS, how to do a protest.
Hang on just 1 second. Let me easier for me to find this faster.
Yeah, we can look up how, what the criteria is for a protest.
It's in the 43 CFR, it's 1610, and I just don't know if it's .2. I think it's .2. But yeah, it's in the regulations there. And I can send a note to somebody later, and actually I can probably forward the actual regulations to someone if you want to just send me or tell me your email.
Okay.
That'd
So
be great.
basically our point is that as you know, in Utah, in eastern Utah, there's extremely scarcity of water and water resources, and protecting the groundwater and the surface water, perennial water, the springs there, is extremely important and should have priority over trade and business and any business secrets like the, if they have a patent on a process or a patent on what kind of solvent they use or whatnot. So we would like to be able to, ensure that those things are considered fully.
Well, okay, I mean, there is only so much as far as water that BLM can do because BLM doesn't manage water. The states manage water, and they manage it through the water courts. And I believe Utah is similar to Colorado. I can tell you how Colorado works. And Roger, you might know more about Utah, but in Colorado, you are granted rights through the water court, and there are senior rights and junior rights.
And basically all whole 100% or more is already allocated.
No, because there are contingent rights. So let's just use the Piceance Basin in Colorado as an example. In the Piceance Basin in Colorado, many of the senior water rights, many of them, are owned by the oil and gas companies and some of them are companies that are looking to develop shale. They also own what's known as contingent rights, and those contingent rights have to be, essentially, they have to go to court, water court, every 7 years, and prove to the judge that they still need those rights to develop things, potential things down in the future. So they have to do that. Now, in Colorado, what happens is because many of those companies aren't using those water rights right now, they let the farmers and ranchers in the Piceance Basin, who actually sold those water rights to them, to continue to use those for agricultural uses. But we do discuss in our document that should commercial development go in a big way, there is potential that, the companies would need that water, and then, that would change the look of the Piceance Basin from more of an agricultural area to an industrial area. But we don't really have control over how those water rights are granted or who gets them or when they get them. That's totally a state function. And so if Shell owns all the water rights and Shell chooses to use those for development, there isn't anything we can do in our document but essentially disclose that could happen, and which is what we do.
Okay, thanks.
And Roger, does it work similar in Utah, or is it different?
No, it works similar, and these companies, I know they own water rights. A lot of these companies do own water rights in some of these projects. I grew up in Colorado, in western Colorado, and that's what the ranchers did. They sold all their water rights to the companies back there in the 70s and 80s. So so the water rights are already owned by the companies.
So the last questions that we have relate, this is Rachel Sherry, by the way, nice to talk to you again. The last set of questions we have relate to public consultation, and I don't know, I mean, between you and Roger, you can indicate who between the two of you is most closest to how, public meetings are set up. But I guess my question for both of you would be is whether you've considered that the BLM gave the public sufficient opportunity to be consulted and also to give their questions during the PEIS process.
Well, I do, because I'm the project manager. And so the process, BLM has essentially a process that we follow when we do planning and NEPA documents, which this is one of them. And the first thing that we do is we hold scoping meetings. And that's where we talk to folks about, here's what we think the issues are going to be. Is there anything that you guys think are also issues that aren't on our list? And then do you guys have any alternatives that you would like to, consider as we're developing the EEIS? And a lot of folks think an alternative is, well, we want you to protect water. And that's really not the alternative. An alternative is more fully developed in terms of how each resource would be addressed under that particular alternative. But we had we actually have 14 scoping meetings throughout the 3 states. Then once that's done, we take that information and we go back and we write the environmental document and the land use plan. So in this case, it's a land use plan amendment and a programmatic environmental document, which means it's kind of at the 60,000-foot view. Once we get that draft written, we send that out to the public for comment. And in our case, we had 7 public meetings. And we had those in, actually we didn't have 7. I think we had 4 public meetings, one of which was in Salt Lake, one was in Vernal, one was in Rock Springs.
Yeah, in reference to the, I mean, obviously we have, the population, potentially affected, obviously the greatest density would be in the Salt Lake County area, the greater Wasatch Front. There was a meeting held in the Grand America this past March, in a small room. The consensus from people on both sides of the issues, both people who were in favor of energy development and those more opposed to energy development, were pretty actually unanimous that it was a pretty unsatisfactory forum. In fact, I mean, there was news coverage that said that there was no chance for the public to speak openly. It only sought comments that people could submit later in maybe a written form. The meeting room where it was held was far too small for the over 100 people that wanted to show up to even move freely. And I don't doubt that there were probably plenty of people that, when they saw how crowded it was, left.
Well, I'll address those kind of one at a time. Based on previous meetings we had in Salt Lake, we rented the size of the room that would hold that number of people, and a lot more people showed up. So I do apologize for that. Generally, when we do scoping meetings, we are seeking input. So we do, have the kind of a format meeting where it's an open mic kind of, everybody gets, between 2 and 5 minutes, depending on how many people are in the room and, how much time we have to address issues. Once the draft is out, when we have open house meetings, they're really to answer specific questions. We have the resource specialists available there who people can go up and say, I was looking at the section on cultural, and I noticed that, you guys were talking about the Oregon Trail, and I have a few questions about that. And so we try to provide the resources for people who've been looking at the draft to come and talk to people. It's not really an open mic format, and we didn't advertise it as such. We said it would be an open house format, which is the format that BLM generally has for our draft documents, where we have our specialists available to answer questions about the documents. Now, I know that was frustrating for some people, but this is typically how BLM does a NEPA document, and we were following that format.
I guess, Sherry, our question is more along the lines of, do you think that was appropriate?
Well, I do, because that's how BLM does these documents.
But do you think that's appropriate in
what we do?
But do you think that's appropriate in reference to opening up, at that point, still a much larger volume, as it actually ended up being of public land without anybody getting to ask questions in a public forum?
Well, we were actually closing. Previously we had opened up 2 million acres, so we actually were closing a lot of acres.
Right, but that's not my question. My question was, do you think it was appropriate?
I do.
Is there any qualitative analysis of these public meetings, or is it just that you hold a public meeting? Is there some way that you have to analyze how the meeting was run, the kind of space you were in, the kind of comment that you received, to tell whether or not it was an effective meeting, or is simply holding a meeting satisfy the process? Because our concern is that, I understand you're following policy, that's all you are doing in this process, and so it's difficult for us to enter in a conversation, because if you are saying you're following policy, we don't have any recourse. But if the policy doesn't require that the public meeting be effective, be truly a public comment space where people can be open to discuss the issue that they now know about, because frankly, and I would love to hear your answer to this issue, people being allowed to input the process before there's even an EIS means that people have to do a ton of their own research to really understand the issue. So how is the public supposed to bring relevant input before there's even an EIS or a land use plan for them to go off of? So I guess the question is, I'm asking a few questions, but given that the public meeting was so obviously ineffective, is there any kind of recourse for the public? Specifically, if we can ask or demand for a rerun of the meeting, essentially, that the BLM would resource and fund and provide so that we could have an effective meeting, considering that this one was so clearly a failure?
There is nothing to my knowledge that defines any of that. I mean, it is a requirement to have a meeting. It's generally our policy to have the open house kind of format meeting at the draft stage, so I'm not sure that, especially at this point in the process, when the record of decision is almost due to be signed, that there would be recourse. I could certainly ask my boss if he'd consider it, but I'll just tell you it's kind of late in the process.
When is the ROD supposed to be signed?
We have, so the final went out November 9th, and then we have 30 days, a 30-day protest period, and then concurrently we're running a 60-day governor's consistency review. So the end of the 60-day governor's consistency review would be January 9th. Depending on what comes in from that, what we're getting from the governors will impact how we write a record of decision, but, I would expect a record of decision in the first few months of the next year.
Okay, thanks.
So I suppose that our ask would then be, I understand, it's clear on many of these points that, you have a culture and policy and requirements, and some overlap, some not overlapping between those three sort of features. I guess our ask is that, whether it's beyond your culture, whether it's beyond your policy, even whether it's beyond your requirement, we are asking for a more satisfactory public meeting where people have adequate time during that meeting to have an open mic forum dedicated to answering questions from the floor.
Well, and like I said, I can certainly forward that request up the chain, but I just kind of letting you know, as far along as we are in the process, I'm not sure how much it will be.
In the sense that oil shale and tar sands development is, not only does it require a lot of infrastructure, it's not a transitional fuel, it's, I don't think you can really categorize it as transitional energy. And so, when the BLM, and this comes from your own website, when you say that you may best be described as a small agency with a big mission to sustain health, diversity, and productivity of America's public lands for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations, and one of your priorities include climate change, I really think it's on the agency to take a very holistic approach. And I think there was an opportunity here to do this, because it is actually a document which is analysing a large piece of, a large volume of public lands. And it's also extremely programmatic in the sense that it's really setting the sort of precedent for which a lot of these other environmental assessments are going to take their lead from. And really, I don't think that you've addressed the more general picture of what happens if we allow tar sands and oil shale development. So I don't really think it's such a strong issue whether we know exactly how many greenhouse gas emissions are going to come out of which mine and out of which refinery. And it's more taking this holistic picture and how can you start developing tar sands and oil shale, which we know have a massive carbon footprint, and at the same time stay true to your commitment to safeguard our lands for future generations.
Oh, well, let me just ask you specifically, what are you looking for that's not in there?
Well, sorry, this is Renee Widdison, also from Peace Up and TarSands. My question is, why are these lands even being considered for tar sand and oil shale production?
Well, in 2005, Congress passed the Energy Policy Act and told the BLM to consider them. So it's a congressional act. If you look at Section 369 of that act, that's where they basically, in fact, I have it right here.
So the BLM was mandated to consider these lands, and so this document is your response, and you say you're following within NEPA standards with the information that you have with TarSands' potential impact. And you don't, do you feel like the BLM is taking as Natasha's asking, a holistic and a qualitative approach to the question of climate change and environmental impact in Utah? I mean,
I do, and I feel like we're doing it. I don't know how familiar y'all are with the National Environmental Policy Act, but that mandates that the BLM, anytime the BLM is going to take a major federal action, which if we were actually leasing, that would be considered a major federal action, that we analyze those things in accordance with NEPA. We have done that here to the extent that we have the knowledge to do that, and that is also what NEPA requires. And so that's why I'm kind of, when you talk about a holistic approach, I mean, we've done the best with the information that we have, and without more site-specific information about, well, this is the kinds of equipment that would be used, and and this is the amount of production that would occur. It's very hard to, calculate on a quantitative basis specifically what's going to happen. I mean, we can, in here, in our document, we talk about things on a qualitative level that, construction of buildings and processing facilities, roads and other infrastructures, retorting, crushing, sizing, all of these things are going to cause emissions. And we don't know specifically what kinds of emissions, but under NEPA, we're required to disclose what those impacts are going to be. So at this stage, we're disclosing that on a qualitative basis with a commitment that prior to doing any additional actions, we would analyze those on a quantitative basis.
And why wasn't climate change a sort of criteria? I mean,
climate change is a criteria, and if you look, like I said, at page 4-55, we have a discussion, essentially saying that we know that there are potential effects associated with both tar sands and oil shales' potential contribution to climate change. So, I mean, we have disclosed that from a climate change standpoint, there is going to be an impact, a potential impact from this development. And then again, like I said, have made the commitment that prior to leasing or site-specific development, but prior to leasing and site-specific development, we will do additional rounds of NEPA to disclose to the public exactly how much that is.
Okay, so this is Connie. I'm with Utah TarSands and Peace Up, and I would like to know how I follow that process. So will it be on the website when somebody makes an application for a commercial lease, also for another R&D? I mean, there's an R&D that is, Asphalt Ridge, and there's also some others, so some of the information is already out there. There's also information about the increased energy that it takes to produce this type of fuel, and also the emissions potential of refining that, upgrading it, and burning it. You know, especially in the Salt Lake Valley area.
Well, you know, the government, and this isn't just BLM, but this is just the federal government in general, we announce all of our actions through the Federal Register notice. And so if we're going to do another round of our D&D, our previous 2 rounds have been announced in the Federal Register. In general, when we get an application for, just say, an oil and gas document or a coal mine, we have a NEPA list that our individual field offices keep, and you know, you can search those to see what projects have been approved, and then the environmental documents for those projects, once they're completed, are posted up there as well.
That's called the EMBB here in Utah.
So I can look for the Asphalt Ridge one there.
So in the interest of time, I feel like, you know, we have some other questions, and just in the interest of time, I feel like we should move on to some questions we had about water,
Okay.
Water impacts.
This is Connie again. So the estimate on how much water the the tar sands development is using, there are some estimates in the EIS for that. Can you direct me to that?
Oh, I'm just looking for that right now. Water resources, starting on page 4-31. The assumptions, though, gosh, let me, assumptions okay, so starting in chapter 4, are actually 4-2 is where you'll find many of the assumptions that we've used.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's different assumptions depending on the different techniques, so surface mining, underground mining, and then in situ mining. So those are kind of 4-2 through 4-12. And then the discussion on water resources is actually on page 4-31, or it starts there, and then we also talk about groundwater, surface water, water use.
Yes, I've read those parts, and
Okay.
So I can refer back to that, but one of the things about developing the tar sands is that chemicals are used for the Utah development. At least that's the preferred method right now, is the delimiting. So the impacts from that one of them is that the solvent and anything that the solvent picks up is like 1,000 times more mobile than it would be just with water, and that is not really addressed here, and that would be an impact to any downstream or perennial water.
Well, it would, and if we actually had a project, I mean, the only company that I know that's doing any research on tar sands development right now in the United States is and they're doing it on private lands, and actually their solvent is citrus.
Delimiting, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, we don't have a lot of information about that. Should a project on BLM lands occur, you can bet that that is one of the most important things. I mean, there's a lot of things we'd be looking at, but certainly the solvent, how they're going to use it, if they're going to be able to recycle it, if there's going to be portions of it that are going to be wasted and need to go somewhere, you know, where is that disposal going to be, how is it going to be disposed of. All of those things would be part of a specific project, but we don't have that in front of us right now, so it's, you know, it's very speculative, and NEPA, you know, if you look at the CEQ regs, they don't require the agencies to speculate. You know, if we have a specific project in front of it, then we'll definitely be analyzing that, but we don't have anything like that in front of us right now.
Yeah.
An end time? Is there a time at which you need to complete?
I'm shooting for an hour.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
That's what we were thinking as well. I just
If
wanted
you
to
start beating the dead horse, I just will call it good.
Sure thing.
Other than that, I'm good today.
All right.
Sorry, Sherry Thompson is busy. Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or hold for more options.
Morning, Sherry. This is Roger in Utah. I have Rachel Carter here with me. And if you can call in, the number is 801-539-4240. Thanks, Sherry.
Okay, so while we're waiting for her to maybe call back to talk about the EIS, just wanted to ask a few questions about sort of how the BLM's position and your position on climate change. So the issue of, obviously, I mean, you probably have a chance to read this after the meeting, but we're very concerned with the issue of climate change and the impact that TarSands in Utah will have on climate change. And so we're wondering if you agree that climate change poses a threat to the state of Utah, to the United States, and to the planet generally.
Well, I guess we have to set some ground rules down right now.
Okay.
My opinions don't go out. I'm sorry. I mean, I can't give, I have a lot of personal opinions. I can't say what my personal opinions are, one way or the other. So, you know, so my answer is going to be strictly for the BLM. If the BLM addresses climate change and EAs and stuff, that's, I'm sorry, but that's about all I can say.
Okay,
I mean,
will you address that issue then?
I just know that they look at an EA and it's analyzed as much as required, and in the EAs, all the EAs, you know, they look at all the aspects, and I do think some of them have climate change in them.
10,000 pages of this EIS didn't mention it once.
Okay. No.
Or can you be specific
Yeah,
where,
well,
it is addressed?
No, that'd be more for Sherry to answer on the climate change. I mean, well, our involvement with the EA was that we reviewed it, and my staff reviewed it for the technical aspect of, just for the Utah portion of it.
Shouldn't the technical aspects of the Utah portion also include the long-range effects of climate change, because the Department of Interior has mandated that the BLM consider climate change in all planning exercises in Section Order 3226. And the fact that it's not included in there means that it's actually major agency oversight, no?
I'm not gonna say yes or no on that. I mean, I'm not gonna get drawn into that.
I'm not trying to draw you in. I mean, it's just a
Well,
serious
I'm just
question
saying,
because this is all we have to work with.
I
And
know,
we understand
I
that
know,
there's a
I'm just
government
saying
position
that
on
I-
climate change, and the BLM is
reviewed-
not dealing with it.
Sherry is, she's the one that works on this full time.
Okay. On
My-
the EIS.
Yes, that's her job. She works on the EIS. She's the oil shale person for the BLM. My staff, when we got it reviewed, what we looked at was for our portion of the state on it. We didn't look at other states or anything else.
So what did that include? Sorry. What does it include when you look at and review for Utah, the effect in Utah? What exactly are you
We
looking
looked at the accuracy of it on how it affected the, like, benefit on if it, how it affected those things that were supposed to be excluded. We looked at was, I have to see what all my comments are. A lot of those were technical errors that we looked at, that we comment on the technical aspects of it. Because he said, my staff is technical.
Sorry, I don't understand what technical means.
That'd be like, my engineers looked at it, for the technical aspects of it.
When you say looked at it, what are you referring to as it?
We reviewed the draft EIS when it was for internal review. We reviewed it, and what we reviewed was the technical aspects, but like I said, we restricted just to Utah because my staff didn't have time to look at the other states. So we looked at,
Yeah.
so we compared the numbers and made sure the numbers looked right. If there's misquoted anything, we corrected that, and that's what we commented on.
So you're dealing with like water and geology. Sorry, I just don't understand what you mean by technical aspects. What specifically are you reviewing? Are you reviewing effects on water and air and soil contamination and things like that?
No, air would be, there's an air quality guy that would look at air. We looked at basically like tonnages, you know, is it reasonable what they said? I mean, one of our comments were, I'll tell you what our comments was, that some states had 15 gallons per ton. others were 20-foot, 20 gallons, 20 barrels per ton. Oil shale production was economic. Some of our comments is how that, our question is how could that be that this amount is economic here and not here? So that's what we looked at for the reasonableness of it for.
Mostly the quantitative bit,
Quantitative.
which most of this is qualitative.
Right. So we looked at that, our questions were more quantitative. Is that right what you're saying, that it's economic to have a 20-foot zone, and I think what, 20 barrels per ton or whatever it said, or 20 gallons per ton, and in Wyoming they had 15 foot and 15 gallons. So
Okay.
we looked at the technical side of it.
So really what you're trying to tell us is that we are talking to the wrong person here, right?
Yes,
So
and I think
we handed in a people's environmental impact statement, and we wanted to speak to somebody on that day, or at least deliver the environmental impact statement to somebody.
Right.
And we've then requested a meeting with the BLM, and now you haven't read the statement.
I just got
And
the statement. That's
well,
why I had to
actually,
live
we
it.
were
That's not, we
we
submitted over.
submitted
That
it
was
to the office.
problem.
To this office?
Yes.
Okay,
And
well,
this is the basis on why we
Okay.
got the meeting. So really, I'm wondering, at what point do we actually get to ask some of these questions and are not simply referred to another authority?
Well, I made it pretty clear, I thought to Rachel when I talked to her, that the point of contact is Sherry on this.
But we're here. This meeting got set
So
up
there's
here,
nobody
and
local that we could meet with?
Well, I guess I'll understand, we want to meet with, but all the comments, the decision making is going to be from Sherry, it's not coming from this office.
So when we were told to call back and were given a specific number that day, that was not necessarily a reflection of whether we would be reaching the correct person. Is that?
Right, because
Okay.
when you and I talked, I was really unaware that they gave you the.
Yeah, I mean, I just called the number that they gave us. so-
Right, and,
So let
and
me-
you was the first one, and it was very shocking that it was told to call back here
Okay,
from.
that's, yeah.
So
I
let
mean,
me
I can
let
go
me
get,
ask you this though. The BLM is an agency which essentially has the privilege, you might say, of administrating public lands, and and I feel like how often do you get 60 people outside of the BLM saying that they would like to ask some questions and get some responses, just out of interest?
All the time.
All the time.
And if you look at our lease sales, we have public hearings on coal. I attended the public hearings for the oil shale and TarSands EIS when they came out here, both times. And I realized there's a bunch of people at both of those. And I apologize that they told you to come. I don't know, maybe they misled you, Rachel, when they said to come. I can go get our public affairs. I think one of our public affairs people, the one that told you to come over here, Megan. I mean, you said there's a woman, a man that talked to you.
Agent Love.
Oh, maybe it's Sherry.
Hey, Sherry.
Hey, Roger, I am so sorry. We converted over to that Google thing, and I lost all of my appointments.
That's because I had to copy mine yesterday, and
Well,
I
I'm
had to
sorry
save my
about that.
contacts.
Okay, anyway.
Hey, you're okay though. They're beating me up here.
Oh.
Now we know.
We're being very
Right,
courteous.
I would say.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Here's what the deal is, Sherry. These people came back on the 19th and they was protesting. One of our special agents, and I think our public affairs person, said, make an appointment here so we can discuss the EIS.
Okay.
And they gave them my number.
Okay.
When I talked to Rachel, I said, really, she should be talking to you because you're the project lead, based on the Washington office document. But I said I still would be happy to sit here and listen to what they had to say. So that's where we're at. But the
Okay.
questions they're asking me is on the document, which is more appropriate for you, because they're asking about why climate change wasn't addressed in the document
Actually, it is addressed in the document.
Okay. So,
Sherry, hi, this is Natasha speaking. I'm here from Peaceful Uprising in Utah TarSands Resistance. And maybe we could go ahead and just ask you some of these questions we were hoping to ask Roger.
Okay.
So, first of all, the Environmental Impact Statement, or the PEIS, it doesn't really address climate change in a holistic way, in the sense that these energy developments and oil shale and tar sands developments are likely to have a very considerable effect on our atmosphere, simply because tar sands and oil shale emit massive amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm wondering really, why was that never truly addressed, in the sense that there would be a sort of analysis of how much in terms of, how much in terms of volume would be emitted?
Well, this document, and I don't know how familiar you are with it, so if I'm telling you stuff you already know, just, stop me there. But this document, unlike an oil and gas document where we would be able to lease from a RMP kind of a document, because we know enough about what oil and gas impacts are. Because many of the technologies that are being used this time around in developing oil shale are new. We don't actually know what the impacts are going to be. And just as an example, I can talk about water. There's several different in situ technologies. When we talk to those companies saying, well, how much water do you think you're going to make? They're like, well, we don't know. Well, if I can't, if we don't know how much water they're going to use, then it's hard for us, say, for example, to determine what the impact on the Fort Colorado River endangered fish are going to be. And so while we had initially, back in 2005 when we first started this, had hoped to be able to use this document to lease, we realized at that time we don't have enough information about the impacts to use the document to lease. So essentially we're just making an allocation decision which says, for now, these areas are open and these areas are closed. And what we specifically say several places in the document is that prior to actually leasing, so making a commitment on the ground of a resource, of resources, BLM resources, we are going to do additional NEPA. And if at that time, during that NEPA, we find a reason not to lease, then, the answer can change. And so when we went to address the impacts in the impact section, which is in Chapter 4, and specifically what you're looking for is on page 4-55 of the PEIS, we had to talk about potential effects. Based on our experience with oil and gas and coal and other mining activities, here's what we think the potential effects are going to be. And so that's essentially what this document is just potential effects. On page 4-58, we talk about GHG emissions, the regulations and the trends. Based on what we know, we have some comparisons on page 4-60, impacts from emission sources for oil shale facilities on 4-61. So to the best of our ability, we have addressed those issues with the information that we have at the time, which is really all that NEPA requires. Additional analysis is going to have to be done, again, prior to leasing, when we have some more information about, let's say, the AMSO technology in Colorado works. Well, right now, they're just at a really kind of pilot scale, a smaller scale. So in order to have a commercial facility, they're going to have to, build up, and they might have to have a gas plant, and they might have to have some other things that right now they don't have. And so when we get that information from them, which we will have to have in order to convert them from an RD&D lease into a commercial lease, then we'll have the information to do the analysis that we need, but we don't have it right now.
Not sure it's at
Yeah.
The best spot is right there.
Well, then maybe we should have it right there.
Just be hearing.
Sherry said she'd call in if she could, so
Oh,
we
we're-
won't wait for her. Rachel, that's okay.
That's just fine.
She said that you guys already talked and everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, she called me on the phone
Okay.
last week.
She said she's ready to call now.
Okay, do we know how long the season will be? Or should we go ahead and make
I think
a
we
start?
Pardon?
Yeah, I think we should go ahead.
Yeah? Can we make a start?
Because she needed to repark the car, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so we're here today in response to the BLM's recent decision to open up public lands to oil shale and TarSands development.
Okay.
And several weeks ago, on November 19th, we came as a larger group to attempt to deliver the People's Environmental Impact Statement, which is now before you. So we were told after we attempted to deliver the statement as a whole group that it would be more convenient if we rescheduled a meeting. So this is exactly what we've done, and we're now also significantly less people, which is one of the reasons that we're filming it. So we're going to hope to share this with people who can't be here because they're at work. So maybe we could do a sort of round of introductions. I realise that we've probably all shaken hands by now, but maybe just to say quickly our name and if we're here on behalf of an organisation, to say who we're here with.
Okay.
Well, my name's Rachel. You and I spoke. Rachel Carter is my name, and I'm with a group called Peaceful Uprising.
My name's Renee Wilson, and I work with Peace Up and Utah TarSands Resistance.
I'm Connie Modro. I am with the Utah TarSands and Peace Up, and a concerned citizen in Salt Lake City.
Richard King, concerned citizen.
My name is Natasha Deininger, and I am also with Peaceful Uprising and Utah TarSands Resistance.
John Hampshire with Utah TarSands Resistance.
Okay. My name's Roger Bankert. I'm the Mineral Support Supervisor here for Minerals. And Rachel, I'll tell you what, let me get it. Can I get a piece of paper so I can just, you guys circulate, write your name down?
Sure,
So I can
yeah.
have it at the meeting?
Sure thing.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
You gotta be at a disadvantage, it's usually more BLMers.
This is how I'm going to take my notes, okay? You didn't say.
This is mostly the comments. It has a DVD in the back. The first one has the executive summary, which is good.
You're gonna put your name, and if you guys wanna contact or anything, you do that too.
There she is.
Hi.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
And Susan, we just introduced ourselves, so you can go ahead and just introduce yourself,
Okay.
if you're affiliated or.
Susan Stewart.
Okay.
I've been involved with the Sierra Club.
Okay.
Roger, your position here then, it says you're chief of the branch of minerals. What
Right.
what exactly is that? Is that what the oil and gas and oil shale and TarSands is all under, or?
Right, I work for the Deputy State Director of Lands and Minerals, and he's under, he has minerals, realty actions, and we do cadastral survey, our division.
Okay.
And then I'm his, one of his sub-supervisors, and I'm in charge of all the minerals, which is oil and gas, coal, hard rock, mining, sand and gravel, etc.
Okay, so the leasing comes through you?
Oil and gas leasing comes through, yeah, leasing comes through here also.
Okay, so oil shale and TarSands and all that.
Right, but right now, TarSand, the only TarSand we have is one that was pre-PEIS, which is the asphalt ridge one. You're well aware of that. That was addressed in the PEIS.
Is it in the commercial phase now?
No, that EA is not complete yet. And then on oil shale, we manage it, but they was leased out of Washington. You know, the first round oil shale was a few years ago, which was, when I got here at OSEC. And then Interpet purchased OSEC a couple of years ago. And OSEC was the one that purchased the old, I'm not sure what the mine's called, it's a big shaft out there. Clear back from the
What's OSEC? Is it OSEIS?
OSEC, Oil Shale Exploration Company, I think is what it stood for.
Okay.
They've been involved in it since, like I said, when they had the one back in the first round of oil shale. In the 80s. And then we had a second round oil shale lease nomination about 3 years ago. And we had one application for that, which was Aurora Source.
Oh, what?
Aurora Source.
Aurora Source.
Right.
Oh, I thought you said Horse.
And
okay, Aurora Source.
they have not done anything, and Washington office looking at about rescinding their application or not. So the only actual oil shale we have would be the Interpet project, which is right now on private property. They're doing the testing on the private, and they own the BLM stuff, which is in the book that it was excluded from the EIS due to the settlement agreement. The Interpet project was.
Oh, okay.
So we've got a few questions for you,
Okay.
if that's okay.
No problem.
So have you had a chance to read the People's EIS?
No.
No. Okay.
That's what you just gave me?
Yes.
No.
No. Okay. Because when we called to arrange this meeting, we were told, or we were informed, that some of the EIS or the People's EIS was considered protest, and that was sort of the basis on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what Sherry Thompson indicated to me,
Right.
is that there were parts that were considered comment, part
Right.
of protest.
And Sherry Thompson, she's the lead on the project, and the protest was going through her, so we don't see him here.
Okay.
So she's the point of contact on the EIS.
Okay. And is she going to call in at any particular time?
She's supposed to have this done by the end of the year, I know that.
Oh no, I mean today. Is she going to call in?
She's supposed to call in today.
Okay, well then maybe we'll save questions for the EIS until we can get.
I can go try to get her number. Unfortunately,
it's
we
in
just
here.
went to a new email today. We went to Google.
Oh, the first day.
Okay.
Yeah, first day, and I just got logged on before you guys called, so I'm not sure. So if you have a number, I can try to call her right now.
I don't know where it is at the moment. It's in
Let
one,
me go
probably.
get it. I can go get it real quick.
That's right.
I think we got it.
This is number
We'll
one.
look for it while we're talking.
Let me go call it real quick. That's what I got over.